Oh, sir, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not a car guy. Like, dude, your freaking tires are more bald than Sergeant Major's head. You don't need to be a mechanic or a car guy to figure that one out. How's it going, everybody? Today on this video, I'm going to show you, someone who doesn't know anything about cars, how to do a basic vehicle inspection for that road trip or long weekend that's coming up. Now, to do this super basic, easy vehicle inspection, you're going to need two things. You're going to need a penny and a tire pressure gauge, or as one notable red patcher that I've worked with once called it, a tire barometer. First thing we're going to look at is paperwork and registration. Now, if you live in the United States, hopefully I don't need to show you what a license is because I'm not going to show you my license. I'm not going to put that on camera, but I do have an old license plate here. So again, this should be self-explanatory for everybody. This one is expired, top right, expired in 2018, July of 2018. So make sure your registration is up to date. You should also have a little rectangular piece of paper. Again, I'm not going to show you mine on video because it has some personal information on it, but you should always have that little rectangle of information that you got from the DMV in your glove box. Next thing we're going to look for is state inspection. Now, if you live in a state like North Carolina where a state inspection is not required, this may not apply to you, but most states, including Virginia, require a yearly state inspection. So this inspection expires on the last day of April 2025. While some states don't require the license plate to be on the front of the vehicle, almost every state, I'm pretty sure every state, requires it to be on the rear of the vehicle. And in Virginia, both front and rear license plates are required. Once you've got the basic admin stuff out of the way, the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to walk around the car, make sure if there isn't anything super obvious. There shouldn't be anything sagging, there shouldn't be like body panels hanging off it, anything crazy like that. After you've walked around the car to make sure there's nothing super obvious, you want to go ahead and get underneath the car and just do a quick cursory look at the undercarriage. If your car looks like this, you definitely do not want to be driving that car, and I definitely recommend you get yourself a new car at this point. But a little service rust is okay. This car, Subaru, covers pretty much everything in plastic. Everything under here is good to go. This is also a relatively new car. Next thing we're going to do is going to take a look at the windshield and all the glass windows. You want to make sure there's no chips or cracks or spider webbing across any of the glass. Make sure it's all good. And on this vehicle, it's good to go. Now, I actually do have a chip on the windshield in my Land Cruiser, but it's not anything that will prevent me from driving the vehicle safely. Now, they do make self-service kits where you can get a resin and actually fill in the rock chip, but if the crack has spider webbed out where it's outside the diameter of a penny, which this one is not at the moment, you're probably going to need to replace the windshield. Now, this is a nicer tire pressure gauge. This one probably costs anywhere between 30 and 40 bucks. You don't need to get one this nice. I recommend it because if your tires are overfilled, you can actually let air out with this little valve right here. But you could just as easily get one of those pencil tire pressure gauges from a local gas station. To find the PSI for this vehicle, you can either use Gunny Google or you can just go ahead and pop the door open and check the PSI on the inside of the door jamb. What you're looking for is a sticker that looks like this. You're going to have the front, the rear, and the spare. So for the front, we need 33 PSI. For the rear, 32 PSI. And for the spare, since it's a donut, it's going to be 60 PSI. But what happens if you have a Japanese imported car? How can you figure out what the PSI is without a standard American sticker? Well, if you have a Japanese imported car, the sticker is going to look something like this. These three kanji means tire pressure. And this number right here, 2.0, is the tire pressure for this vehicle. Now, 2.0, that's obviously not in PSI, that's in bar. So what is 2 bar in PSI? Well, once you throw it into the calculator, that comes out to 29 PSI. So even if you have a vehicle imported from another country, you should be able to figure out what the PSI or the tire pressure is for your vehicle. All right, for each tire, you're gonna go around, take off the valve stem cover, and this is sitting at about 30, 31. Now, it wouldn't be the worst idea to go ahead and fill this up a PSI or two because that 32 PSI from the sticker is supposed to be 32 PSI cold. So 1 or 2 PSI isn't the end of the world. Anything more than 3 or 4 cold, you definitely want to go ahead and fill up your tires. And make sure to do that on all 4 of your tires. Next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take your penny and make sure that you have enough tread where it's covering the top of Abe Lincoln's head. And you can actually see that these tires are just about done. So you got a little bit less tread on the outer, more on the center, and about the same. So we actually have a little bit less tread on the outer, which I'll talk about tread pattern here in the next clip. So the tread on these tires is what actually evacuates water and provides traction on the road. For tread pattern, you want to look at your tires. They should be wearing down evenly. It's not uncommon for the front wheels to have less tread than the rear wheels, because as you brake, all that weight is being transferred to the front of the car. Now up on the screen, I'm going to put a photo of different tread patterns and what they mean. So feel free to go and pause the video and read the photo. If the tread is worn on the outside, you probably need an alignment. If the tread is worn down on a narrow strip in the center, then you probably have too much air in your tires. The center is going to be bulging out, and more of the center of the tire is making contact with the ground than either of the front edges. If you have edge wear where both outer edges of the tire are worn down evenly, then your tires are probably underinflated. If there's individual non-continuous bald spots, then your tires probably aren't balanced properly. Lastly, if you have cup or tiger stripe wear, then you probably need to replace worn suspension components. Tires are expensive, but after your brakes lock up, they're the limiting factor on how far your car travels before it actually comes to a stop. So definitely not something you want to shirk on. I spend about anywhere between $600 and $800 for one set of tires. It really just depends on the wheel size as well as the type of tire you're buying. To get the most out of your tires, you want to try and rotate your tires in accordance with your owner's manual. You know, the owner's manual, the thing in your glove box that almost nobody ever reads. If you're not sure what your vehicle requires, check the owner's manual. All right, now we're going to talk about fluids. Next thing we're going to do is pop the hood. On this car, it's right under here. Now while we have the hood open, we're going to check the following. We're going to check the oil, the brake fluid, the coolant, and the windshield wiper fluid. The first and most important thing that we're going to check is the engine oil. Now the location is going to vary from car to car, but you should be looking for a little yellow ring handle like this. I'm going to pull this out. It's already covered in oil, so we're going to give that a wipe. Make sure to clean up any oil that you accidentally spill. I'm going to push this back in. Now, if you look at this, you might think, Connor, your own vehicle is overfilled. What are you doing? Well, this is actually probably exactly where we want it to be, and I'll explain why in a second. Now, this is going to vary from car to car, but on this Subaru, the engine oil dipstick is in the front of the engine block. And if you back out, you can actually see that my driveway is a little bit of a forward slant. So the engine oil is actually pooling towards the front of the engine where the engine oil dipstick is. So whenever you're checking your dipstick, bear that in mind, where the dipstick is on the block and kind of how your car is sitting on the ground. If it's a little further back like that, the dipstick might read a little bit low. Ideally, you want to do this on a completely flat surface. Moving over to the brake fluid, you can see that it has a min and a max line. Make sure the fluid is between those two. And I just bled the brakes on this car, so the fluid is nice and clear. If this fluid looks black, you need to get it serviced. Now, when it comes to checking coolant, there are two kinds of tanks. There's an overflow tank, which is what this is, and there's an overexpansion tank. Check your owner's manual and read the caps to make sure that you're not attempting to open an overexpansion tank. The big difference between an overflow tank and an overexpansion tank is that an overexpansion tank is pressurized just like the radiator cap. You never want to open up the radiator cap or an overexpansion tank while it's hot. If you do, all that pressure is going to blow out into your face and probably spray hot scalding coolant all over yourself, and that is a bad time. But to check to see if you have enough coolant, you can go and come to the side on this car. Again, it's kind of hard to see. It might be difficult to see on camera, but go ahead and check your overexpansion tank or your overflow tank and make sure the coolant is between the hot and cold lines on your tank. On this car, it's kind of hard to tell what the level is on the windshield washer fluid. It's really cheap to buy in bulk from Costco or an auto parts store, so I always fill it up right before I set off on any road trip. The second to last thing we're going to check while we're in the engine compartment is the battery. What you're looking for on this is making sure that the battery is secured. You want to make sure that the battery is secured in the battery box. There should be absolutely no play or jostling of the battery, and that looks good. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove this cover. Take a look at the terminals. These are nice and shiny as they should be. If you see any blue corrosion that kind of looks like blue sand, you're going to want to go and clean those terminals off. Same thing, make sure that there's no play or wiggle in the connections. If there are, just go ahead and make sure they're tightened down. The last thing we're going to check while we have the hood open is you're going to check, make sure there are no leaves or anything blocking the drainage or any sort of vents on your cowl or anywhere else in the engine compartment. Over time, especially after fall and winter, where leaves like fall down and they like to collect right in here, those leaves will retain water. Worst case scenario, they'll back water up into your car, which I've seen happen before. But in most cases, over the course of many years, that water will just sit there and eventually turn into rust and degrade pretty much everything around it. So super easy, non-mechanical thing that you can do to extend the life of your car. Just make sure to keep all of this cowling and these drainages, as well as the door jambs, clear of any leaves and debris. All right, that's everything under the hood. Let's go ahead and start the car. Both from inside and outside the car, you want to listen for any loud knocking or ticking or any just weird sounds. If you've been changing the oil frequently and keeping it between the lines, it should be sounding silky smooth, just like this. When you start the car, go ahead and check to see if you have any check engine lights or any other lights that might indicate a problem. The lights that are on right now, the coolant light will go off once the engine reaches temperature. I'm not wearing the seatbelt on, so the no seatbelt on light is flashing, and the e-brake is currently on, so the e-brake light is on. Any other light might indicate a problem. Now, every car is going to be slightly different, but in general, when a car reaches operating temperature, the idle RPM should be somewhere around 800 to 1200 RPM. As you can see right now, the RPM is up around the 2000 mark. It's probably sitting about 1800 right now. That's common for a cold engine start. That'll start dipping down to about 800 to 1000, maybe 1200, depending on the vehicle. If your vehicle is idling at 1800, 2000 RPM, even after the car is warmed up, that might indicate a problem. On the cluster, we're gonna make sure that the lights work. So we got left turn signal, right turn signal, lights are on. There's no indicator for regular lights, but you should see the hazards, not the hazards, the high beams and the windshield wipers. Yep, that works just fine. And then if your vehicle comes equipped with them, we're gonna check the rear. That works just fine. Moving down to the center console, we're gonna check to make sure that the heater and the blower works. Depending on where you live in the wintertime, this actually might be life-saving. Make sure that works. Yep. That's working. And then go and check the defroster. Just move your hand up. Yep, and that works just fine. Now, if you're doing a road trip in the summertime in Arizona, AC may be a go, no-go, but in Virginia, it's just a nicety, but we're gonna go ahead and check it anyway. Yep, and that's blowing cold. The next thing to do is to check all the lights. We'll check the front lights, the right turn signal, the left turn signal, the hazards, the high beams, and if equipped, the fog lights.
There you go.
We'll do the same in the rear, but also make sure to check the brake lights,
Reverse.
the reverse lights,
All right, park.
and lastly, the license plate lights. Next, we'll hop back in the car to check the seat belts.
All right.
Make sure your seatbelts actually work. If a seatbelt is broken, either get it fixed or make sure you don't have a passenger in that seat. Obviously, if it's the driver's seat and your driver's seatbelt doesn't work, you're not going to be able to legally drive the vehicle. For adults, it's a secondary offense, which means that you have to get pulled over for something else for them to give you a ticket. But if a cop sees someone under the age of 18, i.e. a minor, without a seatbelt on, that can be a primary offense. So they'll actually pull you over for that, and that will be the reason you get pulled over. Now, in Virginia, it's a Class 3 misdemeanor. It's a $25 fine for the first offense. But as someone who volunteered as an EMT before my current job, just wear your seatbelt. Don't give a first responder spicy deja vu because you decided to Leroy Jenkins yourself through a windshield. Very last thing, something that almost everybody forgets doing until they need it, and at which point they're kind of up a creek, is checking the spare tire pressure. Let's go ahead and get all this out of the way. And now we have access to our spare tire. So in most cars, this is a pretty common setup. We got the spare tire right here, we got the jack, and we got the associated accessories in order for you to safely jack up the car. If you're interested in seeing a video on how to use your spare tire, go ahead and comment down below. I'll go ahead and make another video, and if I do end up making one, it'll be linked up above right here. But in the meantime, what we're just going to be doing is checking the spare tire pressure. Unfortunately, I've made this mistake before where I check everything else, but I forget to check the spare tire, and then I run over a nail. I need to use the spare tire, and it's down at 20-30 psi, which when you take it out and you check it, it looks like it's fine, but once you put the weight of the car on it, you realize it's bad to go. So unfortunately, the spare tire stem is actually underneath all this. It's on the opposite side, so we're going to take all this out, pull the spare tire out, and we're going to check the spare tire pressure. Now, for a lot of donuts of this size, the recommended tire pressure is going to be around 50 to 60 psi, but go ahead and make sure to check that sticker before you go and fill it up. All right, and as you can see, that's about 37 psi. So what I'm going to be doing right after filming this video is going to the gas station and filling this up. Because if we got a puncture on one of our main tires and we had to use the donut, this would be not usable. All right, guys, so that's just a basic introductory vehicle inspection. It's not super hard. You don't need to be a mechanic or a car guy to be able to do this and kind of inspect these items. You don't, outside the tire pressure gauge, you don't need any special tools. And this is just one of a couple things that I do to make sure my vehicle is ready for a long weekend or a long road trip. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, go ahead and comment down below what you want to see next. Give the video a thumbs up. It'll help out with the YouTube algorithm. And hit that subscribe button for more cars and adventures that makes you smile. Thanks. Bye. Oh, Brad.